Hey, hello. I just wanted to kind of show off how I make my swatch cards, my more detailed ones like this here. Since I was about to make some new ones, I wanted to try to show it off for a bit, so I thought now was a good time. So, first to kind of show off what the swatch card is, um, I make them the same size as a playing card, like an ATC, an artist trading card, 2.5 by 3.5 inches. It's nice to. I'm trying to stick to using more conventional shapes and sizes for everything I paint these days because when you do, it's always easy to find supplementary materials like these kind of playing card sleeve protector or things like that that are kind of multi-purpose. They can be used for protecting my cards as well. This one even, I bought it several years ago for when I was into artist trading cards. They have like UV protection or something. I'm not sure if it's actually true or not, but it had good reviews and it does have quite a blue tint, you know. So I think that's because of the UV protection part. So I think it does do something. Maybe not great for protecting, like for using for a, an artist's swatch card, but I can always take it out if I really want to look at the exact color, you know? So, uh, for these cards, what I've got is I punch the corners with my special little corner punch here. I like to use the kind of hole punch, corner punch here as well, just in case I want to put them on a ring or something, and also kind of helps to orient. So even when I'm painting on it and stuff, I can always tell what's the top right corner, and then I don't end up with it's like it's upside down on this side and flipped around, and I just hate that. So on the front side, I stamp with this sucker, which is it doesn't come exactly like this, but there are various like these rubber stampy type designs on Amazon and other places where it's for swatching, especially for swapping for artists. Some of them are really cute, like they're shaped like little bottles or little paint tubes or things like that. I tried to go for what pieces. Usually there's like multi pieces. What pieces would be most useful to me, and I wanted to be able to show off as much as possible on the one card as I could, and then I actually sliced up multiple different sections of the bigger sheet of little designs and then just kind of glued them, not glue, but put them all together like this. So they're sticky on the back, and I just cut them with like a scissor or X-Acto knife, and then I arranged them to perfectly fit a card. So I've got the line here, and this acrylic block. There are fancy ones where it's like you can align it perfectly in like a book form and slap it down, but I really have only gotten into these stamping materials for this so far, so I don't know. I'm not super informed on all the fancy stuff. So for my card, I've got the line to be able to put the title, and then I put this little box here. It's just like a generic box, but I use it to put the brand on the top, and then on the inside of the box, I put the pigment code or codes if it's a mix. And then they've got the GTS for granulation, transparencies, staining level, and LF for light fastness. Then I've got this long bar that I use to just show a gradient. I've got this thicker bar to show the mass tone as well as, more importantly, the opacity. Because I put, for this part, I try to put what's kind of official for like what does the brand say about their own paint. Do they label it as granulating, or do they label it as staining or whatever? And then, but then, how does it actually perform? I like to show that too, because a lot of times these don't quite match up one to one. Like they say it's fully transparent, but I think it's kind of a little opaque for or whatever. So we've got that little black line. This one is blank. It's kind of like a key card to kind of show off. But we've got this black bar to show the transparency. And when I first stamp it, it is not fully I'm not able to get it fully black, so I do use extra black ink to fill it in. I'll show that later. And then we've got these little like divot lines, and I just use that area to kind of practice showing the lift and how staining it is and how liftable it is. And then I used to fill in. So I've changed over time. Like you can kind of do it how you like, test what you think is important. But at the beginning, I wanted to kind of test salt behavior, but I guess I'm bad at salt because I've played with salt several times, and most of the time I fail to get anything to come out. I know some paints are better than others, but I think it's just me. My technique isn't good. So since then, I have changed how I use this, and instead I use it to test kind of the dispersion, where I'll just paint a strip like this. From here to there, I'll start from here. After I wet this whole area here down, make it nice and wet, then I'll paint a strip of full mass tone level pigment all the way down and kind of let it show how much does it disperse out towards the other end with the water level, with the high water concentration. And I like testing that. So you could test that, or you could test glazing or something else. Then on the side here, we've got these little bars, and these 3-section bars fills up the rest of the space. This is to test the full concentration mass tone, the middle tone, and like a really light tint. And then on the bottom, we've got mixes. So this is kind of the most labor intensive. It's a very extra, but I like it. It's a good way to really experiment and test a paint. So doing the full card for a new pigment or new paint, it can really help you kind of get to know how well it mixes and what colors you can get. So in the past, I had kind of a split primary choice here with the, as you can see on this side, the Quin Magenta PR122, and these were all core paints, so I chose them all from the same set. PY35, Cadmium Primrose, Yellow Primrose, PG50, which is Cobalt Teal or Turquoise, I think this was Neutral Tint or Payne's Gray. It might have been Payne's Gray. The PR168, which is a Scarlet, PY83, the Diarylide Yellow here, Ultramarine Blue, and a Buff Titanium. And you can kind of choose what colors that you feel are most useful for you to test out. Now I've switched over to I've kind of been refining kind of what I actually like in paints. I played with granulating paints and things like that a lot, but now I've learned that I mostly like more transparent paints, and I also like the split primary is pretty nice to have, but in terms of the key colors, I feel like if I really want to test out a full range, then I've gone with one for every main color, so primaries and secondaries. And these are all really transparent, really staining colors. I want these to be kind of like the key colors that I want to test out, because they're also colors that are very popular for mixing. For the big brands like to use these in lots of their mixes too. I think that's very, like, it's very useful to see what they think is good for mixing for their own popular colors, because then that probably means that they're good for mixing overall. So still with the magenta, the Quin Magenta PR122. This one is Nickel Azo Yellow. That's my favorite yellow. This is the PB15-3, which is the Phthalo Blue, the green shade. Same Buff Titanium, the Transparent Pearl Orange P071, PG7, Phthalo Green blue shade, PV23, Dioxazine Purple, and this one is Raw Umber. And these are all, again, core. So these two I kept, even though they're not transparent, so that it's good to have, like, to kind of test the range. What does, have one that's like, how does it work with a really opaque color, and how does it work with a really granulating color? I would have also liked to test like a neutral blacks, like to have a test with a mix. So sometimes I might swap that out sometime. So that's kind of how I designed, or kind of like transfigured everything on here for that purpose. And then on the back, it's just blank, and I just use a tape. Which thickness was it? This one. I think this is a 1/2 inch. I put it on the side here to protect this for labeling, and then I use this to cover and test and paint the whole thing as a gradient. I like to put some spats of water. Sometimes I didn't, but when I compare how useful they are to have the spatters versus not, I've ended up really liking having these, because at first this is really great to test for any granulating paints, any mixed paints, because then you can kind of see how does it separate when there's an uneven amount of water when it gets watery. You can kind of really see the behavior with charging and water drops, how smooth it is and everything. And then after I let that dry, the full gradient, then I do another full tint strip on the side using my, I think this is a 1/4 inch brush, all the way down. I used to just do that, and then I tried testing it with having a little line too for the opacity. I do think that's a pretty useful thing to put there, but in the end, I've switched back to not bothering with that, because I tested here and I think it just looks nicer to not have the strip. On the side here, I put the pigment information, the name, the brand, and for some of them, if I feel like the official name is not reflective of what it actually is, or like it goes by a more common name, or there's a more scientific name that I find more useful, then I'll put that here. For example, this one is, I haven't finished this card, but this is Magello's version of indigo. But when I compare it to other indigo swatches I've seen online, as well as the only other indigo I have, it doesn't look like it at all. It looks a lot more like a Payne's Gray, and like the mix compared to other indigos I've seen is also not indigo-like. So I'm trying to find my other indigo here to show comparison for my box of swatches to compare. Let me see here. Maybe I haven't yet put on the label. Let me take a look. I only put them into the sleeves when I've completed doing everything. A lot of these, I've done most of it, but then there's like some part, like I haven't looked up the full label information because they don't put it on the bottle, only on their online charts, or I don't have enough paint because a lot of these I made from a dot card, and so this does need a decent amount of paint. So, or I'm just too lazy to do the mixes, because the top and the bottom are glazes, not mixes, and I test both ways. Where like the base, the bottom is where the base color of the mixing color is, and then the top is gonna be the swatch card color. So you can see, like, how does it look when the swatch card color is on the bottom and you glaze the yellow, green, and the purple on top, and then how does it look the other way around. A lot of times they're pretty similar to each other as well as to the mix, and sometimes it does show a difference, like it does glaze better one way or another. Or it mixes better than it glazes. Oh, I skipped over the indigo. Yeah, I haven't finished this one yet. I do need to finish the top glazes, the information here, and the mixes. But you can see just how different these two are, as well as, let me go look for that Payne's Gray and neutral tint again. Like, it's a lot closer to this neutral tint than it is to the indigo, right? And also closer to Payne's Gray than to indigo as well. It's white. Oh, I have so many. And these do take a while to make, so this is really not like necessary at all. It's very extra, but it can be if you. I think of it as it's also just kind of fun for me, kind of meditative when I just want to put paint to paper and just want to play around, but I don't want to use my brain at all. So Payne's Gray, Indigo, or Magello Mission Gold's Indigo, Neutral Tint, all pretty a lot more similar than Indigo to the Indigo. So that's why I put that. Magello does I think that one of the main complaints with Magello is because they're a Korean brand, the English names for the paints more often than for others. A lot of companies have a few weird names, but more than usual, they do tend to have names that don't quite match like what you expect for that pigment or that color compared to how other people tend to name it. So there's that. Now I'm gonna go ahead and make my cards now, and talk through the process as I do so. So I like to use good quality paper for this, by the way. I don't want to bother with cellulose paper, cheap paper. So this isn't like Arches. This is Baohong Academy paper. I think it's it's very popular. It's a very, very excellent budget 100% cotton paper. I'd say I like it pretty similarly to Arches, to be honest, and I've used a lot of Arches. It does have a really strong texture, which isn't always my favorite. So I still prefer smoother textures like Lanaquarel or Hanamu, but when I want something that's really good quality but still doesn't break the bank and doesn't make me feel, oh, I can't ruin it, then Baohong is my top choice. And as well, especially when it comes to the swatch cards in particular, it's really nice because even if on my own paintings I want to keep texture most of the time to a minimum, I still like to see how does it behave with a rough texture, with granulation. I want to see the extreme end of what the paint will do. Will the colors split apart? Will they do anything weird? Like you can see on this neutral tint, they've got a yellow, a pink, a yellow, a magenta, and the phthalo blue. The yellow ochre, or this is actually the transparent version, transparent yellow oxide, basically synthetic yellow ochre to make it transparent. So it's a rare neutral tint in that it doesn't use any black and instead uses the kind of the yellow substitute in order to make their color, and you can really see it when you see. Let me bring it out. I don't know if that will help, but you can really see it when you look at the as it tints out on the bottom, and then in these couple splashes here on the edging rings of those water speckles, how the yellow from the yellow oxide really kind of comes through from the back to help neutralize the color. And then you can see in the more mass tone, the thicker areas, how the blue is, probably the blue and purple together, is a lot, comes through stronger, so it's like cool to warm. And whether good or bad, some people like, some people don't, or in different situations, I just want to know how it behaves, and so rough paper is better for that. And it is kind of a fussy thing, but I do at least try now when I'm cutting the paper and then doing a little hole to show front and back on the top corner, to put the rougher side on the back, so you can kind of just feel which side is more rough. This is the smoother side, this is the rougher side, because the back is where I'm going to be doing all the gradient and the water splashes to really test the water behavior. So I'm going to take these. I did a big spree where I cut all my paper down to some standard sizes. 5x7 is nice to cut down for these cards because, well, 5 makes 2.5, 7 makes 3.5, so it makes four cards almost perfectly, you know? We can see that, I think. if I put these here. So let's go through. I'm just gonna do the one sheet for now, just because we're showing off the process. So I've got this sheet here, and I'm gonna get my pencil to lightly mark. This ruler is kind of like a quilting ruler. You can see first stitches, but I love it. It's how it's clear, it's clearly marked all the way down. Of course, it would be nice if it also had centimeters, but quilting doesn't really do the centimeter thing, so I still like it better than traditional rulers that are not see-through, like metal rulers. So 2.5, 2.5, and then there's a little extra here, like by a quarter inch. I do tend to add a little extra quarter inch if I have the space, just to be extra careful. So I'll mark these, and then mark these 6, 1, 2, 3.5, and then on the other side. And let me take a look here. Maybe if this one's short, 3.5, yeah. So I guess we gotta cut off a little bit to make it exact. Just because I want to be exact about it. Not because it really has to be. Alright. Once I make the marks, even though I already try to use a light touch and hard pen, I use like 2H lead in these pencils. I still like to lightly erase it as much, to just barely leave a mark so that I don't have to worry about it being ugly later. Because I just need this for long enough to cut it. So I've got this little paper cutter. It's very cheap. My last blade dulled and I lost it, so I bought a cheap replacement. It's so cheap. It's not quite the exact replacement because this is so old. They don't have the exact brand replacement anymore, so my dad found this knockoff online, so it's constantly falling out if I even... Yeah, so I hope I don't lose it because I use it a lot. But enough of that. Let's cut this down. If I can see my own mark, which I erased. We're gonna do it this way. Yeah, right around there should be good. And even these thin ones, unless it's like so ridiculously thin, I tend to keep these even so, just to do test my paints on, like check the color and things like that. Okay, so we've got that, and then there was another mark right down the middle here, the 2.5 inch mark. Perfect. And then these two together. I usually try not to cut 2 at a time because this kind of cutter is very weak. Like 1 at a time is kind of its limit for watercolor paper. But I don't want to have to remeasure. And you can see it still didn't work. But I at least got to make enough of a line that I could see where to mark it without having to remeasure. Alright, there we go. So, first step done, we've cut the paper down. Double check, because I can measure wrong. Looks perfect. Now I just want to see which is the rough side. I'm just going to feel it to double check. Then we're going to use my corner punch to first punch the corner, and I tend to, if I don't look correctly, sometimes I'll do this, right? And it'll make a bad punch. It'll cut a weird cut. So sometimes if I keep making that mistake, I'll just turn it around and I'll punch it like this instead. If I'm lazy, I won't bother. There we go. And for now, I'll just leave it like that, and I'll punch the other corners to make it fully rounded like this later, just because I'm being lazy. And there's various corner punches like this on Amazon, which is also where I got this one. This one, I'm very happy with this purchase because both the more rounded and the sharper rounded corners have been very useful for making the cards like this, as well as for making like bookmarks for cards, things like that. Like cards to send, like Christmas cards, things like that. All right. Now I know which side is the front and where's the top and where's the back. So now we get to the stamping part. I have my stamp here. And then this is a waterproof ink, right? Onyx Black by VersaFine. So you can't just buy any old stamp. I think the ones with the waterproof ink, it is going to be more expensive. There will be fewer options. So again, the brand, in case it's useful. I got this when I first started making these cards like a couple years ago, I think. I used it in a spurt to make a bunch of cards then. And then I put it away and haven't used it for a couple years. And finally opened it up. I was afraid it would all be dried up because that tends, in my experience, stamp inks and things, they do dry up, but this is going strong. I got it all over, so that's normally not a problem. It would be probably safer to wipe it just in case, but I haven't had an issue yet. So you see how this black strip, it's not going to have the perfect coverage. But we're going to deal with that later. We just need to do the main marks for now. I line it up manually. Then press it down. Just like that. And there, like I said, there is a stamp tool for this where it's like a book type hinge design where instead of just manually doing it, you can kind of since it's a book style, you can just align it perfectly with the grid on the back and everything. But that's more money, and I really don't need it since when I'm only doing it for this one thing. Maybe if I get more into stamps and using stamps for other things, which could be fun, but this also sounds like another expensive thing. So we're going to stamp all 4 of these. And though these are a lot of work, in order to cut down on a little bit, it's best to kind of do a bunch at a time. I'm only going to do the 4 for now since I'm kind of showing off the process. But doing it in like an assembly line format where you're cutting all the paper and then punching all the paper and then stamping all the paper, etc. It does help so that if like maybe you make a bunch kind of preloaded, like kind of like this one or whatever. Where's my other indigo? And then you can just kind of have them stacked on the side, and then when you get a new color, you want to test a color you haven't really used much before, but now you want to use it. It's useful for that. So I've got that. I'm going to put this aside. Now, I used to use a Sharpie marker to help blacken this because I don't want to be tricked by being like, oh, look, there's some speckles or something, but it's not the paint is not transparent or opaque. It's just because there's speckles from the stamp itself. But this Sharpies, the alcohol or whatever, does tend to bleed through. Not all the way, but enough to show something, a little something. And even so, the paint will normally cover up that ghost. But I found that using this carbon ink, which is used for, it's a pigment waterproof ink that's used for, what do you call it? These, not dip pen, not nib pens, these fountain pens is also perfect for it. And I have got this little sucker, which is, it's like an empty brush pen with the reservoir that you can fill with your own ink. And I filled it with my carbon ink. I got this from Jet Pens, I think jetpens.com. They're a great stationery pen ink company. They've got really fun YouTube videos to show off their products and also how-tos if you want to get into all that kind of fountain pen stationery stuff. That's where I got the ink too, I believe. Though I admit, I really do like their brand and all. Sometimes a few of the products are much cheaper somewhere else. Which is, I mean, that's the unfortunate cost of being a small business, right? You can't make all the same deals as a big mega corporation. I do feel guilty for maybe not buying everything I could from them and choosing the cheaper options sometimes. But there we go. It's nice and black now, so we can test without worry the opacity, which is one of the big things for me. The big things I want to know is it transparent? Does it stain? Does it glaze well? Does it stain well? Overall, I want it to be able to stain pretty well because while it is really useful to be able to lift things off, it also makes it really hard to glaze, especially multiple layers. So we've got that. You'll notice as well that for the transparency, the default stamp here, it did have the little square already with the line there, but I've noticed that a lot of brands on their color charts and things where they have their own symbol to mark the transparency, same for the staining, sometimes they'll have 4 levels: transparent, semi-transparent, semi-opaque, and opaque. And the empty square is their version of transparent, and then with the slash is their version of semi-transparent. And so in order to be able to show that on my own cards, I've had to do some weird stuff sometimes, like I'll fill it in with like how to show. Let me grab a random piece of paper. So I've been dealing with it till now by kind of doing like, well, this is semi-transparent, and this is fully blocked in. This is semi-opaque. But on the whole, I don't really like that style. Like, so I ended up, if it will show, kind of just carving out with an X-Acto knife that little line. Same for the for the staining, though I did, you can see here, leave just a little bit so that I can connect the line if I want, but I can leave it. I think I prefer just blank, but I tried both. I might end up carving the last of that, the little ridges off that too. So we've got that. Now, next step is then I'm gonna glaze the bottom of each of these. This is, I can still do kind of like a machine style, go through all of them. And because these are all highly staining, but just in general, like, you know, mixing, going between paints, you have to clean off your brush every single time. That's kind of a pain. So I have these wells, which have the pure pigments in them. I gotta mix them up a little. We're gonna start with yellow since it's the lightest, you know, the easiest to contaminate. And I'm going to do all the yellows on all the cards before I switch over to the next color. And I do try to transition to the next closest, like from yellow to orange to magenta to the purple, so that even if there is a little bit of staining left on the brush, yeah, hopefully it doesn't affect it too much. So I'll do that, and we've got our little swatch card here, our little leftover, so I'm going to just test the strength to make sure the strength is good. Not too weak, not too strong. So let me see my old example, or my new example, to make sure I get it in the, try to keep I try to keep a consistent order. Not that it super matters, but I've got the nickel acid right here, so that's where I'm going to put it. For all of these, I used to try to do more of like a full strength tinting for the base layer, but I've noticed as I've done a lot of them that if I make the base layer too strong, then it's especially in particular if it's like a really dark colors, then it's the glazing is overwhelmed by the dark color, and it doesn't really matter anymore. Like you can't even see how the glaze mix looks. So I try to go a little more mid-tint now. You're rarely going full tint anyways, you know, when you're painting. And since these colors are so strong, I can do a bunch without even having to redip. And normally I'd like to do like 20 at a time or something. Alright, so there we go. We've got all the yellows. Let's do the purples now. We're gonna mix it up. Sometimes it doesn't matter too much that you have to like mix it up a bunch, but for some, particularly where there's like some color separation happening, or where some of the pigments are really heavy, you do want to really mix it up like every time you dip. All right, we're gonna test the strength again, though I added the same amount of water for all of them, so honestly I might have added a little too much water. So I'll try to lay it on kind of thick with the water quantity. Yeah, that's good. Of course we get some animal hair in there. Looks like my dog Luna. We're just gonna have to deal with that. The transparent orange. The other thing with not bothering with too many granulating colors here is like one of the big things with these little mixing chart things is that one of the big things with the granulating colors that you want to see is not like, I think this is mainly, I test the glazing for a lot of this section, but with granulating colors, the interesting things are like how does it mix and how do the colors separate or work together when there's a lot of water, and you can't really test that very easily on such a small swatches. Also, testing glazing on these is a lot easier because you can do it like this in like a factory style thing where you're painting the top layer, the bottom layers of all of it at once, and then painting the top layers all at once. The mixes are the most work because you gotta separate the whole thing to test every single mix, clean it off, test the mix, clean it off. So sometimes I'm lazy about doing that at all, even if I have the paint for it. But it is very useful and important sometimes. Sometimes, a lot of times, like it hardly makes a difference because the glaze and the mix look very similar to identical. But sometimes it is important. The buff titanium in particular, I feel like how that looks as a mix compared to a glaze, it is fairly different. So like opaque ones. Let me test the color again. I don't want to be too strong. It is kind of strong. I might add a bit more water. I like to use this to add more water rather than dipping and trying to add water that way, because it is more precise. Like you can do drop by drop, but more importantly, it's like you can guarantee that the water you're adding is pure clean water, instead of like, even if you've only dipped and cleaned your little water dish a few times, some of that color is still in there, and it doesn't really affect, you know, just a little bit. It's not really going to affect it, but it still makes my brain happy to know that 100% certain that it's not gonna, that I'm not gonna contaminate my colors, my pure clean colors here that I use to do all my swatch cards, by adding some slightly dirty water from my water bowls. And one more with a magenta. While I'm at it, I could glaze the on top for this one card that I haven't done it on yet. Kind of show how that works. And you can see here the bottom color is very dark for the indigo, and yet so it feels pretty subtle. The when you see just this part, it looks like it's a very subtle change. But then when you see next to the bottom glaze, they are definitely different. Like this one's lighter, but in terms of like the hue itself, they're still pretty similar. So a lot of times, either way, you're gonna get a pretty similar result. So it's interesting to see. Sometimes, especially if I have a really staining color on here and I really don't want it to get in there, I'll squeeze my brush manually with my fingers to kind of see the color of the water that's coming out. Or kind of just using water on like just a plain piece of paper to make sure that the water looks clean. Alright, we're gonna do the purple now. My precious core dioxazine purple, which I don't have as much as in this little wheel. I didn't squeeze as much out for that. Alright, we're gonna test that next. Yeah, that's looking like a good color. Okay, and that's gonna be number 3 on the bottom. There we go. I really want to use this color more, so I'm one of my recent goals is to kind of try working with a more limited palette and then expand it bit by bit, instead of what I've been doing, which is I've collected tons of different paint sets, and then I kind of just select any colors I want from the sets. Like each individual painting, usually I'll keep the colors fairly limited. Sometimes I'll even like explicitly choose a limited palette by like selecting, okay, I want these 4 colors, these 5 colors, these 3 colors for this painting, this one painting. But I'll always be switching which paints those are, because I have a full like 200 plus colors or whatever to pick from. Oh yeah, I forgot to glaze this as well. But I feel like that's been fun, and it's been great to kind of get to know the properties of several different kinds of paint, and the properties of paint in general. Like, oh, some of them are more opaque, some of them mix very unusually, even though the shade is very similar or whatever. But now I really want to get to know a few key colors really well and how they mix really well. So these are the 6 that I really want to know. Plus a few of the neutrals like buff titanium, the raw umber, the neutral tint. Next up is the phthalo blue, one of the most popular mixing colors for brands. This is in so many mixes in the big brands, Daniel Smith, Core, etc. It's in a lot of neutral tints and Payne's grays and indigos and greens and turquoises and just everything. That's looking pretty strong. I think I'll add more water. Yeah, really, really strong there. So we're gonna add like 5 drops of water in there. Or more. It's still gonna be really strong. It is a very, very strong color. I love it. But it is hard to use. Not hard to use, but like, can be intimidating because it's like, well, it's gonna stain my brush really bad. So I gotta be kind of extra careful when I'm switching from one color to another. If I'm switching to a yellow or like a beige or something, I better not let any of that blue show through or it's gonna come out green. Yeah, right here. When I first started painting in watercolors, this was one of the recommended colors. Like our teacher gave us a list, and it was a pretty decent list. You know, like a warm, cool, and mid for color for everything. Like a warm, cool, and mid red. Same for the blues and the yellows. And I don't think we had any of the secondaries. No purples, greens, bright oranges, and then a bunch of neutrals, which is a nice way to start and to have it explained to us. And this blue was even in the optional category of blues I could get. Most of them were not optional. And when I had them, like I was like, the color is great, it's so strong, that's great. But whenever I use them in any palette, plastic or metal, they would like just having the phthalo touch the palette, any palette, immediate stain, immediate, big strong stain. None of the other colors stained my palettes that same way. I was like, why do all my palettes keep getting stained immediately? They were so beautiful and now they're ugly. Then I realized it's always you, blue. So I hated it for a bit, but now I'm like, you know what? That's what porcelain is for. So I've learned the beauty of porcelain, and most of the time I use porcelain palettes now. Okay, we're gonna use some of this green. Let's take a look at the shade. Yeah, it's a bit strong. That's fine. I can just lay it on pretty thin. There we go for that one. Here. Here. And there we go. Okay. Speaking of going from phthalos over to pale colors, I'm going to move over to the raw umber and the beige. Probably should have started with those because they're the least staining by far. I just didn't think of it. Alright, so let's see, where's my palette here? Okay, the buff titanium is an example of one of those colors where I feel like it looks very different when you mix it compared to when it's pure by itself. And I see there's some contamination in here. It looks like some spatter, probably from the middle here, managed to get into the well, which is annoying. Let's try to wipe that off and then see how much of it contaminated the actual inside of the paint. It looks like it did get in there a little. I'm going to try to avoid that corner for now. I hate wasting paint, so I don't want to just toss it, you know. Alright, it looks like this one is pretty clean. The water is still coming out a little green. So in which case I'll give it a quick clean right here. So I'll use a bit of my soap. You can see the green is coming out, so yeah, good idea. I want to be especially like kind of pure and clean when I'm trying to make these swatch cards in particular, because like these are permanent reflections of what colors I can mix, and I don't want those to be inaccurate, you know? When doing a painting, you know, you adjust as you go until it looks the way you want, so it's different. Let's see here. Where is my little empty dish? Usually, there it is. Like, this was my old soap dish. I don't want to put a bunch of soap into my cleaning water. I don't want it to become soap water, so I kind of just dip it into the water and then kind of scrub the brush lightly on the side of this bowl to gather most of the discarded soap from the brush. Just because this is what I do when I'm being lazy and I don't want to go all the way to the sink to clean like a single brush when I'm doing it on the fly like this. And then one more dip in the soap. And rubbing it in the sides to help work it into the bristles, especially at the base where the paint really likes to hide. It likes to creep up in there, hide like a little demon, and then come crawling out, oozing out only once you've loaded your brush with a bunch of yellow or beige or orange pigment, and now you've got a weird greeny yellow or some kind of brown. Alright, so that was pretty clean. I'm going to now, you see how like the paint has, even though it's a single pigment paint, it's strangely separated. So like the cooler color is on the top and like a darker pigment is on the bottom. Some single pigments are like this. I think nickel azo is similar, where it feels like there's like a really fine, almost dye-like misty yellow yellow color that's kind of on the bottom, and then they also have like the bigger particles that, because they're bigger, the chunks have like a darker quality because they're all packed together, if that makes any sense. There's a few different colors that are like that, where it's like when they're tinted out and thin, like a few single. There's plenty of multi-pigment ones because they're mixes. Obviously, they're going to separate a lot of times. Even when they're not granulating, they'll still have like a visual effect, like almost like a gradient when you have the thin tint. It's just like a little more yellow, and then the mass tone is a little more green or blue or whatever. Some single pigments though are like that too. I find those colors pretty cool and interesting. I feel like PV55, Quin Purple, not Violet, Quin Purple, also has something of a quality like that. I feel like there's a certain distinct feeling about those kinds of colors that have like a certain duality. And I feel like you can only see those when you have like a gradient or you're breaking the color up or whatever. Oh yeah, I keep forgetting to glaze this little guy while I'm at it. Like you can see here, this color, especially when it's kind of not so thick, like it's pretty watery here. It does not exactly make much effect when it glazes. I mean, it is like, technically it's a white. It's PW6. It's just PW6 like :1. But it's like so putting a white transparent or white watercolor on top of a dark color, you're not going to see a huge difference. Alright, next up is the raw umber. And it's a dark color. I don't want it to be too dark, so I'm gonna add a little water. Here we go. pretty dark. I'll add a little bit more water. It would be nice if there was like a transparent, non-granulating, staining version, single pigment color of like this kind of raw umber color, or really dark, like black brown color. But I haven't seen one yet. Oh, more hairs. Whatever. There we go. One more here. There we go. Oh yeah, forgot. And let's glaze it on top of this sucker too. Alrighty, so there we go. With that, that's our pre-prepared cards all set up like that. I could go ahead and punch the corners too if I really want to do like all the busy work done beforehand. But I'm fine leaving them uncut too. I do feel like maybe the corners are a little cleaner that way too, because when I paint over this side, sometimes it does bleed a little on the edges, and that can occasionally bleed over onto the side and make it messy. And I feel like with the corners there still, if once I cut the corners off later, if there's a little bleed in that corner, it'll be cut off and it'll be tidier that way. So sometimes I leave it for that, but that's just being really, really anal about it. Really anal about it. Okay, so now we've got our cards. Let's go ahead and make one. So I'm going to go ahead and do one example of filling out one card. So I've got these Daniel Smith dot cards, and I once had a dream of making swatch cards for all of them, and then getting more dot cards like Da Vinci and making swatch cards for those too, and Schminke and all that shit. But I realized this is way too many colors. I really don't need to as well. So instead, I've chosen now where I'm, since right now I've been kind of going through colors, trying to pick the colors that I really want to focus on. Like I know that I like, or I'm pretty sure that I like, and filling a need, and I want to do those. And some of them are marked with a little sticker, though I've realized this paper is cheap enough that when I take off the sticker, sometimes it takes off the paper, so I've stopped doing that. But some of these I've already done, and I've pretty much used up all the paint. Daniel Smith has pretty good, really good swatch, dot cards, because they are pretty decent amount of paint. I've done like the Perylene Violet, the Pearl Crimson, and you can see I've used up a lot of that and still have a lot left. It is a little inconsistent and uneven though, so like you see this Mine Yellow and this Aureolin, I'm probably not going to be able to get that much off of some of these small ones. This one, it really wasn't enough, and I'm really interested in this color because it's a really cool transparent yellow, non-granulating, and I was looking for one, so I would have liked just a little bit more, because the back of the card for this that I have is very pale. That happened with a few of them. But for now, I think I want to test out their neutral tint, because I want to compare neutral tints. I only own the one from Core in the tube, which is this one, which I took out of the thing. And this one, like I said, it has no black in it. It's a mix of 3 primaries, technically. Um, and the thing with this one is I want to record a video going over my experience with this color, because I really like the concept of it. I really like the mixes that I've made of it, testing it so far. But when I look at it, a lot of times it does not look neutral to me. Like this looks more neutral, this looks neutral, the neutral gray. Like this kind of leans blue to me. But sometimes it feels like the color changes. But anyways, because of that, I wanted to kind of compare to some other neutral tints that I may own. Right now, the only one is on this dark card. Their neutral tint, it has PBK 6, so lamp black is their first color. So I believe that they list for mixes, they list the colors in order of concentration, so it should have the most amount of black. The next PB19, I assume it's the violet version, not the rosy version, but it could be the rose version. I mean, this one is magenta. And then the PB15. So kind of similar to this, like a warm or like a warm violet or cool pink, you know, magenta. The PB15, and then they have just the PBK6, which is a neutral gray. It's not like a warm gray like a ivory black. It's neutral, so it's like 2 coolish colors and a neutral color. I feel like it's gonna be, no matter what, it's gonna be more warm, like more cool than this. And I've looked up the recipes for a few others, and they're similar. They have a black, a blue, and a purple or pink. I'm like, what? Why? So we're gonna see today. We're gonna see with one of the examples here. So for this, we're going to start off here. And for once I get to this stage, I also like to kind of use 2 brushes at a time, sometimes even 3, so that I can have one to use for like clean water, and the other I will use to actually apply the paint itself for the gradient, and then for the dispersion test, and then later on for the big back gradient. So full color concentration on one side. I try to really make it as fully concentrated as possible. Like, I want butter consistency, if you will. Then we get to the middle where we've got the wet paper, and then we're going to feather it out with our little wet brush, because I don't want to waste the paint on here by making it clean just to feather this out for the tint, right? What a waste that would be. Try to get the full range, so it's not just like from full mass tone over to light tint, if I can. Alright, there we go. And since I've already got full mass tone on here, I'm going to go ahead and fill this as well. I'm going to get a little bit more on there. This side as well. Alright. I can see here that it's kind of got like a bit of a backwash here, so I'm going to dab at this again before it fully dries. There we go. Now we're going to fill up this section with water, starting from those little brackets for the lifting test all the way down. And I like to make it not just lightly damp, because it just tends to dry a little quickly, but like glistening wet without being like sopping, dripping wet. and then as quickly as possible with full saturation brush, we're going to basically right on the outside of that bracket paint down. And then paint up, kind of just both ways. And then drag the paint the rest of the way down. Sometimes if the brush is a little bit too dry, I'll also use this to add a bit of clean water here too. The drops from this sucker are a little big. I do have some squeeze bottles and tips that might make it smaller, but I just started using this recently because before I had pipettes that I would use that they both kicked the bucket recently at the same time. And I bought a bunch of like syringes / squeezy bottles. Like it was like a pack. It was for fountain pen stationery, like refilling fountain pens, but it's just generally useful. Pipettes, syringes, things, squeezy bottles, they're all useful, you know? So I'm trying not to, I don't want to double layer the paint where it's like I've done full concentration and then the paint is dried enough that I'm adding another full concentration. But I think I kind of did that because it was drying pretty quickly. I am talking at the same time, so it doesn't help. Alright, let's see here. Woo! I dripped on myself. At least I didn't drip on the paper, though. The most important thing. My precious paper. Okay. So, put that to the side, that messy thing, before it damages anything. Here, I've got it clean well, so put this to the side for a bit. And we're going to clean that well off from any spatters that have gotten in there. Then we're going to add a bit of water to my brush. I'm going to pick up just a little bit more. So this is what we're going to use to do the tints. First on the top here, I'm going to add a little bit more. It could be also that as a paint they intentionally, since it's not a black, it's a neutral tint, it's not supposed to be strongly tinting in the first place. So it could just be that rather than I've made it too watery. You can see like even in the mass tone here, it's not, I don't know if you can see, but compared to like my lamp black card, even like Payne's Gray and Indigo, the full mass tone, it doesn't feel super dark. Definitely dark, but not black dark. Still, just a little bit more paint here again. There we go. And you know, I don't know how they managed to do it, but it does look like a fairly neutral tint color. Like it actually doesn't look as cool as I expected. Let's take a look at the other neutral tint that I own here. I mean, I guess when most of the paint is a lamp black, the lamp black itself is a very neutral black color, so I guess it makes sense. And then the blue and the PB19, I guess, is just used as a way to lighten it up without changing the hue too much, I guess. So it's not fully, so it helps to add some transparency and weaken the darkening effect to make it more towards the middle. So then once I'm done painting the top little rectangles, then I'll glaze over the bottom rectangles, which I've already pre-painted, and being able to do it all at the same time like this, instead of like cleaning, changing for every color, like much better to do like a number at a time. 10 at a time, 5 at a time, 20 at a time, whatever. They do take a lot of time to make those, so even just 5 at a time probably take you a couple hours, a few hours. And then the tops, I could glaze them all one by one now, but like I said, with the cleaning the brush and all that, I prefer to leave that for after I've done a bunch, and then I can glaze all the top pinks, magentas in a row, then all the top yellows in a row, you know, save time, save energy. So we've got those, and then with that, we're going to get a very light amount of this tint and just make it very light on the bottom here to show what that looks like. And then let's label it. I probably should have labeled it at the beginning. So for this, I mean, you can use any waterproof pen or whatever, pencil. Right now I'm using, what did they call themselves? I've ruined the cuteness with my permanent, black pigment pen ink and messiness. But this is normally a cute pen. A Kakuno Pilot, very nice budget-friendly beginner pen. I mean, just general. It's good whether you're a beginner or not, but if you're starting out, it's like 10 bucks. I use the tape to help me know the thickness because I have two. One is this is like extra fine and this is just fine. So the tape helps me know this is the fatter one. So this is gonna be, what was it, neutral tint. And I also, like on the top here, if it's a brand that tends to code their colors, like, let's see here. Let me grab an example. These guys, Holbein Watercolor, it might be like a Asian color brand thing. Holbein, Magello, I think Paul Rubens as well. They do tend to have their own internal codes or whatever that they have on all of their, it's on the tubes, it's on the charts. So I think W for watercolor, 027. So I might add that. And like I said, again, like if the color is different or like has a more specific name or a better name, I might add that as well on there in like parentheses. So we've got the neutral tint, Daniel Smith. So I'm gonna just put DS. That's enough for me to know. And then we're gonna put the pigment info. That's gonna be PBK6, PB19. Who knows whether that's the violet or the magenta or the rose. I might test out this mix for myself and see if I can get close to it and kind of understand how they made it. I think that's probably a good exercise to try to make the mixes that you know, that you like from brands if you already have all the paints. Okay, so got that. The tint is so light you can barely tell it's there. And then let's see the info that they have on here. Where's my pen again? I always put stuff down and then lose them. Okay, so it's gonna be light fastness of 1. So also another change I made recently is the original stamp had the light fastness markings on there. Here, these little 5 dots. But different brands do it different ways. Some of them have a 5-star system, some of them have a 4-star system, some of them the 5 is good and others the 5 is the worst. So I cut that out. I used an X-Acto knife to just remove those little dot stars that they had so that I can just record exactly what they label it, so I kind of know. So this, they use the ASTM version, which is the Roman numerals with I being the best, or 1 being the best. And then they have, let's see, 2 for staining. So some companies have 3 levels of staining. Some people just say staining or non-staining. And Daniel Smith has 4 levels of staining. So for 2 levels of staining, since we've got the little lines here, I'm just gonna add the line. So, staining level 2. Actually, since I've already done a bunch of Daniel Smith cards with this style, I guess I'll do it like that. I guess for new brands I might change it or something. Transparency level. Daniel Smith has 3 levels of transparency that they mark, that they label. The neutral tint is semi-transparent. And so for that, or level 2, I guess. If it's only out of 2 levels, instead of coloring it in fully or just leaving the line, which implies semi-opaque or semi-transparent, I do this little grid thing, I don't know. And granulating, they say, no, it is not. It does look very smooth. And unlike this one, which is very granulating, as you can see. Probably not, it's not super granulating. The card, just when I do these cards, they do tend to show a lot of granulation, more so than normal when I'm doing these. Hard to explain. So we've got those. Sometimes I'll leave the paint on for like a couple days before I lift it, so I can test, because when it's super fresh, it's pretty easy to lift, right? Tends to be, and I really want to, and I like to know, like, how liftable is it in general if I leave it for 5 days, if I leave it for a month. I mean, I'm not gonna wait a month to lift it unless I forget about it, but like a few hours, at least a few minutes, several minutes. So next, I'm gonna grab this tape. And usually I'll put it on some kind of backing to tape it down. I'll go right up to the edge, like so. Then it's only taped down at the top, onto the backing on the top and bottom. Try to make sure that edge is nice and put down. Then I'll use a nice big brush, like this sucker, with some clean fresh water to color the whole thing, like so. Pre-wet that sucker. Now, this brush is a little small for this. So if the paint dab is really too small, there's no avoiding it, but here we go. This one's nice, not too small. I'll never bother to use a big brush like this for a dot card, for the actual color part, because it just wastes too much paint. Because the paint gets, it's not just the paint that comes out on the paper, the paint also goes all the way up into the ferrule of the brush. All that paint is lost. It's gonna be thrown into the water cup, you know? It's not gonna come out onto the page, not all of it. So, get it nice and fully concentrated on my brush. I don't want to use all of it because I still need to do my strip and a little extra after that. Gotta make my mixes later. But there we go. I do want it pretty concentrated on top though, and this is a pretty liberal little dot, so I'm gonna try to pick up as much as I can here. I'm going to drag it all the way down, and on the bottom I want it pretty light, so let's add some more water. And then let's pick up some more paint with a bit more water as well. It does feel a little bad to use up so much paint for the back when I have such a tiny dot card, but it is the best at a glance reflection of the paint color range, and the paint behavior and texture. So it is very useful and important to have a good strong color here. And try not to be too skimpy about it. If you have the tube and the paint in a tube, you don't have to be stingy at all. Alright, so there we go. Now we're going to add in the little drops here. If it's overly sopping wet, adding the drops is just going to kind of create a big puddle. I feel like I didn't add too much water while making this gradient anyways, so sometimes I'll wait until it's a little less shiny sopping wet. I don't want puddles. But I think it's like, yeah, you can see here, it's doing pretty well with the water here. And then we're going to leave that and let it dry. Meanwhile, comparison. And you can see, even though this side, it looks kind of on the cool side, this side, the mix shows through more, and it does feel a lot warmer, at least for now. So that'll be interesting. I've also done this for a few, like, iridescent or metallic paints. I really want to test different metallics, so this is an example of Coliro's Moon Gold. They also have their own codes, C650, and of course, like, all their metallic paints are going to be fully opaque, but they have a 7 out of 8 scale, so you see the dots are still there, but still very not useful. So 7 out of 8 is the or 7-8. Some of them is just one number, like it's 8 out of 8. A lot of them are 7-8, like somewhere in between. It's very granular. And you can see here how different it can be when you've got compared to from glazing compared to mixing, in particular with something that behaves so uniquely like a metallic paint. Like when you're glazing, since it's fully a really opaque paint, of course when you glaze the moon gold on top, it's gonna be practically full coverage, like you can barely see the color underneath. And when you glaze the color on top, it's gonna be very different in comparison. And then the mixes are gonna be different still. And then on top of that, I feel like I also did experiments where like these were the even mixes like on this chart, but then I also wanted to see like how does it work when you've got these when you drop it in, which is I think more useful for metallic paints. Well, I'm always so impatient. I probably could have waited like 1 extra minute before I added those little droplets, because you can see how much they're spreading now. But that's okay. It's not a big deal. Sometimes I'll add them again because now would have been a good time to add it. You can see how dramatic it is, and you can really kind of see the behavior rather than it kind of being muddy and muddled, a muddled ink spatter. I did want to show off, let's see if I can find the examples of kind of how different these spatters can look. So you can see in my old cards, I didn't really do much spatters, or I wasn't very good at it if I attempted it. But then, by the way, this is the PY175 where I had very little of the color, so I had to be very, you can see it's fully transparent, so that's true. So on the back, I feel like it could have been a little stronger here, but I didn't. I was running out of paint. But you can see how on this paper, even a color that's not supposed to granulate at all still has some chunkiness going on, some strange behavior. So, you know. But you can also see kind of like how colors like this dioxazine purple, this pearl orange, and like pearl red, it just feels like you can see from the water splotches clearly, like the splotches feel smooth, like you can feel kind of like the smoothness of the color, if that makes sense. Then in comparison, you've got like the natural earth colors like raw sienna, the burnt umber, and quinacridone and cobalts and ultramarines and things like that, where the texture just shows even more, even when you don't have the water splotches. Okay. I normally don't use like the hair dryer for drying these cards. I like to let at least my swatch cards dry naturally, but it's spreading a lot. I like to have at least some strip of it to still hold the gradient unbroken, undisturbed, but this one went pretty far. Okay, so it's getting pretty dry now. Dry enough at least to make a strip without it bleeding. So we're gonna go ahead and get our brush nice and wet again and fully saturate it as much as possible with this color. Sometimes I also do wonder with some paints, like how, if they include anything or do anything with the formula to affect it in ways not just the pigment. Like for this, the tinting strength, some of it can be, I think some of it can be up to like the having PB19 and PB15 in there. But I also wonder, like, is that it, or do they also adjust the quantities of other things like the binders and things to force it to be of a lighter tinting strength so that it's more gray, like fully pigmented PB15 with fully pigmented PB19. Those are both pretty strong colors. I mean, I can test it myself later by mixing some of them myself since I have all those pigments. Alright, so I try to use like the natural width of the brush to get down there all the way. But I always have to adjust a little at the edges anyways. Especially when I'm trying to be stingy with the paint. Let me add a bit of a touch of water there again. Just to let the pigment move more evenly across the strip. I think that's a pretty good strip there. Alright, now we're going to peel back the tape here. I'm being a little hasty, but I just want to finish off this card for you guys. Now we can label the label. This is another little anal thing, but I do like to make the codes use my fine pen instead of my extra fine. So for this, let's double check PBK6, PB19, and let's make sure it's flowing. It's not flowing, so I gotta dip it in the water a bit. When you're using pigment inks and fountain pens, it does tend to clog a little easier because fountain pens, fountain pens like ink, like dye inks for a reason. But dye inks are not very good for waterproofness or permanence, so you just deal with that. So this is PBK 6. PV 19. PB 15. No specificity on what kind of PB 15, if it's 15.3 or 15.6 or 15.1. Oh well, and they call this neutral tint for Daniel Smith. Oh, right. Forgot to switch. I've ruined it. I need to do the whole card over again. I'm just kidding, guys. I'm kidding. Mostly. Neutral tint. And I think that's a pretty classic neutral tint, so I won't have any addendums there. Then Daniel Smith. Perfect. There we go, one finished card. Oh, wait. I haven't done the mixes yet. A mostly finished card. So, I do have to wait for the back to dry, but after this I would do the glazes on the top, and like I said, I would do a batch job of that if I could, do a bunch at the time. So I'll be choosing other colors for the other cards, and I'll probably be cutting up the rest of my paper for that too, just do a whole bunch, and then making the mixes in the middle. So I'll go ahead and do like a couple examples of that right now. I probably won't do the full 8, but just as examples. So I haven't cleaned this brush yet. Good thing, so that it can save the pigments still stuck inside of it for the mixes. We need very little for the mixes. We can be very economical with it if we are stingy and careful. So I've got this, and I do have like a pipette or something. So another thing that I like to use in general when I'm trying to be paint stingy and trying to be clean is sometimes having one of these little silicone detail point things. I forget the exact name for these kinds of things. I bought like a cheap pack of 10 at some point with different shapes, but these are nice because the silicone, you can guarantee you can easily clean it. There's no chance of the paint getting into the deep into the ferrules of the brush and seeping out. There's no chance of staining the bristles or whatever because it's a silicone. You can, if you wiped it clean, it's clean. So for our mix, I'm gonna grab another. Let's see, where do I have another place to mix? I've been using up all of my mixing palettes. I need more palettes. This one's pretty dirty, but I can clean it, so give me a moment while I wipe this palette, the back of this palette, clean. This is my Holbein set, by the way. The 6 deep color set. Alright, that should be nice and clean enough for my purposes. I'm not going to bother to wipe the whole thing. Okay, so I'm going to grab a bit of this, use this to mix it up a little bit. Just a very light little daub. And I'm going to try not to use much paint, as little as possible. Even with that little amount, there's so much paint that still ends up stuck inside that ferrule, right? So I really want to get kind of like a middle tone color. So I'm going to keep adding a little bits of magenta until it looks more middle. I think that's probably good enough. I could add a little bit more magenta, but we're gonna live with that. I usually try to keep a little strip of white in between each color. But sometimes I can't, I don't do a good job of preserving it. It's not a big deal. Alright, there we go. And just to show it off, I'm gonna go ahead and see about glazing the top so we can see what the difference is. It'll be hard to see the difference before it dries. And of course the different paint concentrations and such, who knows. If I was less stingy and used more paint to get more of a thicker consistency, the middle could probably be pretty closer to the top and the bottom, for example. But that's fine. You can already kind of see that that's the case, so it's not like it's a mystery. So, like that, we can quickly clean off this little silicone guy. Easy as pie. We'll do one more. We're gonna try the buff titanium this time for some variety. A nice opaque color, because that does tend to show the difference between glazing versus mixing pretty well, because an opaque, non-staining, thicker color like this, it does tend to behave differently with a glaze compared to a, you know. Okay, so we've got that. And first I want to go ahead and do that buff titanium glaze on top. And you can see very well here that the buff on top, glazed on top, and the neutral glazed on top of the buff, they do behave quite differently. They look different. Now we're going to see how different it looks with the mixing. I'm going to pick up some of that neutral tint we still have there, and then we're going to mix it. If I really don't want to waste the paint, because not a single like molecule of paint, because I've got a really tiny dot card and I'm trying to stretch it thin, then I might use the silicone for the whole process of the mixes. A different silicone to mix it and then to paint it on. Sometimes dabbing it like this can also help you to get more paint onto the paper without it being sucked right back into your bristles there. It kind of helps to like makes the water drop into the paper and release, as opposed to kind of gluing to your brush so much. But that's a kind of a stingy trick. it can also have consequences on like how the paint disperses. Subtle consequences, not a big deal. So we can see here, and now that they've dried, the top and the bottom, they do look closer together, though the top looks more chalky compared to the bottom that looks, of course, more transparent. Like, it makes sense. But in terms of the hue you get, top and bottom, they're looking a lot closer together. I feel like the neutral tint, even though I feel like I just barely picked up a little bit, it does come through pretty strongly. Like buff titanium, it is a white, so it's not going to be very strong. Sometimes, if I feel like my mix wasn't that good, like the ratios were not great, I will go ahead and cover it again. Like I'll do another layer. Not a big deal. I mean, whatever's the most helpful, right? Kind of want to see more of what the color would be like. It's a little bit better, I think, for what I want to see. Alright, we'll clean that off. And so you could see how the mixes, how the mixes are more work compared to just the glazes. So you don't have to do like glaze, top and bottom glazes if you want to test different things. Like you could do something where like the top is like a strong concentration of like 80% of the swatch color and 20% of the mixing color. And then the bottom is like 80% of the mixing color and then 20% of the swatch color, and then the middle is like 50%. Like that would also be very useful to be able to kind of see a bigger, like a full range of color mix ratios. It would be a lot more work though, I think. So it's like a trade-off. Now we're gonna lift this, and with that I think I'll have shown pretty much the whole process. So I like to use a good stiff brush here. This sucker, which is a Himi brush from, I got it free in a set of Himi gouaches. I haven't ended up using the gouaches too much after buying nicer gouaches. The Himis are perfectly good and fine as a beginner gouache, but I just love buying stuff, so I ended up buying nicer ones. But the brushes, I still use them quite a lot because it's nice to have like cheap brushes that you don't have to worry about, that are nice and stiff. Like a stiff flat brush is very good for lifting. So I can see here that this one lifts pretty decently. It does say semi-staining, so I wouldn't expect it to be super clean or super caked on there. You can lift a pretty decent amount of the color off of there though. You could be more messy with this, like really fully scrape it down, but it will make a bit of a mess on the... I try to keep it tidy so that it doesn't bleed too much at the edges and look ugly. But I do try to scrub over the line too so that I can lift off the full strip from top to bottom. Some people, different people have different methods for how they want to lift. I think it was Dr. Otokano who has had a lot of great like swatching videos and things like that. Very scientific, very detailed swatches as well. She has like a specific method where she'll do like, I think she says she like uses 3 swipes of the brush or something like that. I just kind of keep scrubbing at it as much as possible because that's how I do it on my paintings. If I'm trying to lift something fully off, I'll just use a stiff brush and keep on scrubbing until I think I've hit a wall and I'm not going to scrub any more color off, you know? So that's what I do when I'm doing my lifting. And there's that. The opacity for this one, with the darker colors like black, dark gray and things, it's much harder to see how opaque it is, but I do feel like it is semi, you know? Like, it looks semi to me. it does look like it's covering the line a little bit. So I'll be doing the other mixes and such later, but that's how I do it. One last thing, aside from using one of these to put them in, I used to have like a with like a full, like you could put it in a binder, 3-ring binder, a full page of cards, like card sleeves and on a full page. I don't know where mine went. It had all of my artist trading cards that I've traded with other artists in there, so it's a little sad to lose it. One day I'd like to get something like that again to hold all my cards together in a way that's easy to flip through. But meanwhile, I have these, so that's one way. And the other thing, another way you could protect the cards, because you could see like with this yellow, that just by handling it a lot, I just made this recently, but just by having it on my table with other art supplies, comparing colors and things, little splotches can get on there. There's already a little splotch on here too, and you don't want to damage these after so much work, and you're gonna be, if you like to compare colors and things, trying to pick out a palette, you want it to be, you don't want to ruin it. So, but if you don't want to do something like this, there's also something like a wax medium or a fixative spray you could do. I've thought about if I want to do that, but one thing to note about those is they can affect the resulting color and look just a little bit. With wax medium, I've heard people say, and I've experienced myself, that it does tend to deepen and darken the colors a little bit. And actually, that's something I'd like to test. Like, it would be good to know and see how that looks as well. So I thought to myself, maybe I'll end up doing that just to be able to see as well. Because if I end up like protecting my most important cards and pictures that I give to people with this wax medium, then that's how it's going to look for a lot of people. So that'd be nice to compare. So maybe I might end up doing this, like covering most of the card, the back, the front, and then most of the back with the wheat wax medium, but kind of keep like a strip here to show the pure untouched color, but protect most of the card from water and paint damage. I'm not sure, but you can kind of customize your swatch cards any way you like to test the things that are important to you. So maybe instead of this, like dropping water in there, you could, if you really like salt, you could drop some salt in there. You could, if you want to see how it plays with masking tape, you could like have a strip of thin masking tape on one edge somewhere to test that, does the color lift off? Does it damage the paper with this particular color? Anything like that. If you want to do like a bigger dispersion test, you could like preserve a space on the back for like a bigger one. Whatever. But that's how I do it. I hope that was at all helpful. Have a good one.